next speaker is going to talk to us about climate emergency delivering on zero carbon buildings. His talk has been the need of the hour to tackle the energy issues faced by the building sector. Our speaker is among the internationally recognized Australian experts in the field of environment and sustainability with a focus on the built environment. It gives me immense pleasure in welcoming Scientia Professor Karan Prasad from University of New South Wales, Australia.
My name is Prasad. I am a professor at the University of New South Wales, Faculty of Built Environment in Sydney, Australia. I run a national research centre and my topic today is low carbon urbanisation and placing it in the context of climate emergency. So, which means we are trying to do this faster than what we previously thought, and can it be done? But placing it in the context of urban decision making, we know it's very complex. We're looking at issues of resilience in cities much more these days because of pandemics, how resilient cities are, while looking at issues of urban microclimates, urban landscapes, design and planning. These are all important things, but we at the same time are very much concerned about comfort and well-being of people, co-designing for that, livability, health, productivity of people within cities, sustainability, transport, air quality, energy futures, waste and water availability, and so forth. But some of these are in conflict with each other. So pandemics has caused there to be a conflict with transport provision because pandemics suggest that you don't hang around together much, and public transport works on the premise that you have a full bus or train. So there are some conflicts beginning to emerge, which previously were not as much thought about. But within that, we beginning to think about smart cities, sensor technology, data products, data-driven design, and so forth. So the whole idea of creating better cities, low-carbon cities, is quite complex and increasing in complexity. We know we have moved from the old world of exploitive cities where wealth was traditionally associated with increasing ecological footprint. And now, as we move towards resilience and more sustainable cities, regenerative cities, we are beginning to see a strong case being made that it can be done with the right knowledge, but also from an economical point of view, it can be done without that much cost. The United Nations had looked at sustainable development goals some time ago. A lot of those are good foundations for good design and planning, and looking at cities in particular. Much of the world population live in cities, and most of the consumption lies in cities in most countries, and a large part of the emissions come from around cities. It's not the case for all countries, but where I come from in Australia, it is the case. So while trying to deliver on resilience and sustainability and a smart future city and delivering on sustainable development goals, it brings a lot of knowledge needs for the architect, the planner, designer, and landscape architect. Other complexities are mega trends of globalization and urbanization, demographic changes where people are getting older and how do you deal with those issues, climate change, A city needs to be comparative, economically comparative, so that it attracts people, talent, and business. But at the same time, you need to be mindful about the environment, so that if the environment goes down, your competitiveness goes down. Quality of life, if the environment goes down, your quality of life goes down, and your competitiveness goes down. So they are pretty much interconnected, but you need to balance between these in terms of urban planning. And good governance, obviously, is a key part of that. So there is an immense challenge in delivering that. When you look at, say, within the city, the issue of energy, which is much more closer to where my interests lie. Photovoltaics, solar energy, for example, is going through a exponential increase in use, and of course, being greener energy, it is clearly a good idea, and many places, my own university here, UNSW, are now, from a energy point of view, neutral in terms of what we use and what we generate. So we have a huge solar farm about 1,000 kilometers away from where we outsource our differential need for electricity. So over the daytime, we generate so much more than we need, which pays the debt for the nighttime use, which is still quite significant base load. So we are doing it this way, and it is being done economically on a 15-year power purchase agreement. So it can be done cost effectively and economically as well. And even our own building, this is the building I work in, and it is largely green. It's a 6-star building with a lot of photovoltaic energy, and the technology was actually invented in this building. We have one of the world's largest photovoltaic research groups working in this building. So it's good to see a showcase building which shows students at a university not only what we do in research, but how we teach people. But in more recent time, what has come to light is the emergency nature, climate emergency. Architects, engineers, landscape architects, all are joining the Architects Declare movement, which is trying to do things much sooner and much quicker. Australia faces serious urban microclimate problems where massive heating, above 40-degree days, the number of days we are getting over the year has increased in the last 10 years immensely. And we're getting 8-10 days of 44, 45 degrees in some of the towns like Adelaide, for example. So when we look at the temperatures going up, what we need to do is somehow quickly turn it around. And that's a challenge for urban designers, architects, and city planners. What is being done is a lot globally towards net zero carbon built environment. This is the big movement, and we find that within Australia a lot can be done, same as all other countries, I guess. We look at not only the operational energy of the building these days, but we go way beyond that into what they call scope 1, which is direct emissions from buildings, scope 2, indirect emissions from building energy consumption, and scope 3, indirect emissions from other sources, all combined, so that we are taking a good account of what we emit in terms of carbon from cities, and particularly buildings. Groups like Global Alliance for Building and Construction, for example, they are, and World Green Building Council, the Royal Institute of British Architects, and so forth. They're all beginning to prepare their short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals. And they're beginning to look at not only operational energy, but embedded energy, and trying to develop guidelines in terms of how we can guide our professionals to design better in terms of not only the long-term, But short term, how quickly can we turn them around towards low carbon and zero carbon buildings? The Global Alliance for Building and Construction and IEA, they're beginning to look at now the entire life cycle from embedded carbon, upfront carbon, operational carbon, and end of life carbon. What can be done in each of the stages, and not only in the short term, but in medium term, what would be strategies to actually bring it down, because it's so urgent now. We need to be much more defined, much more able to think through what an architect can do in terms of meeting these sorts of requirements. There are roadmaps. The Global Alliance, and you can check their website out, has a whole range of initiatives from urban planning, new buildings, existing buildings, and so forth, in terms of recommended actions more broadly. But each of the countries are beginning to do this more specifically for their different climates, different building types within their country, and I'll talk about mine shortly. But these are all practical and doable, so we can reduce carbon rapidly in our built environment sector. What we're doing in Australia, and I'm in the process of writing a book for Palgrave Macmillan, where we have a two-part publication coming out very soon. One is the book itself, which is on climate emergency, pathways to zero carbon, and a guide. So the guide is just a 20-page illustrated document for architects who don't want to read a lot, quite rightly. And the book is for those who want to read deeper and look at examples around the world of what has been achieved measurably. The difference in this book is it's science-based targets, science-based goals, and what can be achieved in a more practical sense. In other words, we measure post-occupancy performance and not just look at the what you call aspirational numbers. It goes beyond that. We are also looking beyond zero carbon energy forecasts towards other work that my center is beginning to get very seriously into, is looking at urban microclimates. To what extent these will changing temperature profiles. In Sydney, one end of Sydney can be 10 or 15 degrees at a higher temperature than the other end. So Western Sydney can be in Penrith about 40 degrees when it's less than 30 degrees in the eastern suburbs of the city. So these are important issues. They have a significant impact in the future on energy consumption when the temperature differential gets even higher. So what we are trying to see is that the future scenario predictions take this into account at the same time. We are also looking at the cooling potential of and mitigation strategies for making sure we keep the urban temperatures down. So we're looking at what role greenery, vegetation, and trees can have in terms of lowering the peak temperatures due to urban heating. What if you add water to it, cooling bodies of water or sprays, how much that can add in terms of cooling potential, and then cool roofs and pavements and special materials. Collectively, what can be done is that we can have about 2 degree or so reduction in terms of the peak temperatures. So that's significant because it can make the difference between what could be a really uncomfortable temperature and something that is more bearable. So good design and planning can have that order of difference. Especially vegetation and greenery has a significant potential, as we all know, but we are doing deep work to quantify a lot of that. We have also been doing a lot of work looking at zero carbon settlements, many houses at a time, where they have not only community renewables, community storage, but also peer-to-peer trading. I'll come to that in a minute. But we have developed platforms that allow for trading electricity between one house and the other before you buy from the grid. So those technologies are very much coming around these days. We also generate a lot of knowledge from our zero carbon house demonstrations and plow it back into policy. So in this case, our research led to a lot of evidence, and it then went to government, and this is the minister from Victoria, Victorian government, and they launched a policy on zero carbon housing, but based on solid science-based evidence that we have produced. We have produced tools, integrated carbon metrics tool. If you can Google this, and you could download a copy of this, and this looks at a whole urban area at a time, and you can look at the operational carbon, the embodied carbon services, all the scope 1, 2, and 3 carbon around the cities, and then start implementing measures and policies to lower the carbon over time, and also use the tool to monitor that. So it's a very reliable science-based tool. We also looking at low carbon materials, geopolymer based materials that we are developing. We're testing it in high degradation environment like oceanfront, and then we'll be using it much more widely as part of standards and codes on buildings and so forth. I mentioned the peer-to-peer trading platform. This won us a Global Disruptor Award at Davos, the World Economic Forum. And the award was given by Richard Branson, and the author of that technology is Dr. Gemma Green here. And it simply allows you to trade energy between houses. One house can talk to the battery of the other house and use, if they are not home, use energy from there. And that accounts for using blockchain in terms of then keeping track of who uses how much from others, and there's a bill at the end of the day for green electrons transferring between houses or groups of houses, and the last option always being that you can go to a grid instead of have a blackout. So those technologies are now coming up. When people talk about photovoltaics, in Sydney, we found that nearly 52% of PV systems are underperforming. People put PV on roofs, but they don't track it. They don't have monitoring at a household level. So what we have done is a precinct-wide tracking tool, which a company now runs, and they let the owners know if their system fails. And they can conduct maintenance to make sure it works. So in this case, a PV system which is supposed to generate so many electrons a day, you can be sure that it's doing that. Otherwise, you can detect the faults. We are also doing a lot of work in building code to drive high performance at the best performance level. We needed a building code which is mandatory. So we did reports from our center to the government and developed trajectory for low carbon buildings 10 years ahead at a time, and what building code changes might occur. And as a result of that, you can drive the building stock that is coming up towards zero carbon. So these do allow you to use government instruments, providing the right evidence for policy to move governments towards a higher performance outcome. And at the same time, we do a lot of work for government in general. Energy, we are hosting an energy efficiency decision making now. And this is one of the federal government ministers and a state government minister in New South Wales on top of the roof of the building I said I worked in, and at UNSW. And what we do when government is looking at policy making in any of the areas to do with energy and carbon, they can give us the problem. We define the evidence around it, and government then evaluates whether they should have a policy in that area or not. So this is a science-based, evidence-based approach to changing the world towards a low carbon environment. we hope that we can share a lot of these with people around the world. And I'm happy to be here and present to you. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Karan Prasad, for your valuable presentation on zero carbon buildings to tackle the energy issues faced by the building sector. I am sure that the delegates have found it to be a very informative presentation. Now we shall take a short break for our sponsor video, post which we shall proceed to our next speaker, Dr. Chandrasekhar.
Epoxy adhesives are widely used in the industry because of their high strength, chemical resistance, and the ability to adhere to different surfaces. But almost all of them have low impact strength and low UV resistance, which makes them weak after long-term use, under stress and limitations. To combat all these issues, we are introducing Bondtite Pro. Bondtite Pro is a high-performance two-component multi-use new generation epoxy adhesive system with room temperature curing. It has very high impact strength, excellent shear strength, better UV resistance, better coverage, and so much more. And it is to be used for bonding various similar and dissimilar materials such as metals, ceramics, wood, leather, rubber, marble, glass, and a lot of other materials. Bondtite Pro is very easy to use. The directions to use are really simple. Step 1. Clean the surface and make sure it is free of dust, unsound material, loose plaster, oil, paint, grease, algae, and corrosion deposits. Step 2. Take equal quantity of part A and part B. Step 3. Mix it for 1 minute with the help of Bondtite applicator to attain uniform color. Step 4. Apply on the surface. Step 5. Clamp or support the surface for 4 hours. It will attain full strength in 24 hours. And that's all there is to it. You can use it for speakers, marble pasting, automobile repair, and hardwood handicraft. Bondtite Pro.